Given that Satan loves to mess up God's calendar and he loves to hijack God's calendar days and try to make them his own, let's look around and see if we can figure out what he's up to in regards to prophecy. So, the book of Revelation gives us 4 periods of time that we need to look at. It talks about 42 months, 1260 days, time, times, and half a time, and it mentions a short space. All 4 of these are referencing a period of 3.5 years. There is a reason for that, why they got divided up. The 7 years is divided in half, but keep in mind we have 2 timelines. We have the rapture timelines and we have the judgment timelines. The rapture timelines are going to be starting down here from the first rapture up to the midpoint and then back down. Okay? This rapture timeline is going to involve the 1260 day count. My camera is acting up big time today. Sorry about that. I apologize, okay? But the 42 months, the time, times, and half a time, the short space, those are going to be dealing with the judgments, because I told you the 42 months was dealing with birth pains, and that has to do with the judgments. So when we look at cutting the judgment timeline in half, this is where we get the Passover to Hanukkah, the Passover to Hanukkah. Okay? So Jesus is making a distinction between the rapture timeline and the judgment timeline. What's going on in heaven, what's going on down on earth. Now, if you go back to the book of Daniel, this is where the 1260 days comes into play. He talked about 1260, the 1290, and then the 1335, where he's pointing us to the fact that there are different calendars we need to look at. Okay, and we're going to look at those shortly. But when you see the 42 months talking about birth pains, that is judgment. The time, times, and half a time, judgment, because it's dealing with Satan. And then Satan gets released for a short space. That's talking about the 3.5 years. Those are the 3.5 years we're going to be looking at down here. So how do we know that the 3.5 year periods are divided up this way, with the rapture being the day count, but the judgments being the months, the years, and the short space? Well, let me show you. If you read in the book of Daniel, he references 1260, 1290, and 1335. And he says, "Blessed is he who waits and comes to the 1335th day." This is the only day count of 3.5 years that offers a blessing. It's dealing with the rapture. The rest of these are dealing with Satan. And they tell us that they're dealing with Satan. The beast was given power for 42 months. Satan goes after the woman for time, times, and half a time. And Satan's released after the millennial reign for a short space. Now, why did he give us 3 different counts for these 3.5 year periods dealing with the judgments? Well, it's because it's 3 different time frames. I told you that the timeline was divided into 2 halves, right? Well, one references the first half, 42 months. One references the time, the times, and the half a time. And then the third one right here says that Satan gets released after the millennial reign for a short space. So if you look at the 7,000 years in God's calendar, 4,000, 2,000, and the 1,000 years for the millennial reign, you have the Antichrist coming here, plus you have Satan coming here, and then after the millennial reign, Satan gets released again. Those are your 3 time periods that are referencing the 3.5 years. So we have seals, trumpets, thunders, and vials for the judgments. Seals are representative of Pentecost. We were sealed with the Holy Spirit on the day of Pentecost. Trumpets, of course, represents trumpets. The thunder judgments represent the Day of Atonement, and the vials or the bowl judgments, the bowls, the little bowls that sit on top of the menorah lamp, they represent Hanukkah, which is our pseudo-tabernacles. Remember, this is our substitute tabernacles, okay? So when we talk about the tribulation period, that 7 years being divided into two parts, you're going to have seals and trumpets basically in the first half, and then you're going to have thunders and vials in the second half. Now, one of the ways we know this has been divided in half is simply because we are told that when the seals are opened, the first one that comes out is a white horse, okay? This white horse rider is known as the Antichrist. Now, we know that when the judgments hit, they're going to last for the remnants of that judgment are going to last for the entire 7 years. So that by the time you get down to the last seal, Jesus is actually ruling and reigning on this earth. So you have the white horse rider, the war, the famine, the death, all that hitting, but it's lasting all the way through the 7 years, okay? Then the trumpets will hit and make the judgment even stronger, and that will last to the end. But the reason we know why the tribulation period is divided into two halves is because we are told that Satan comes for 3.5 years. But there's a white horse rider that's on the earth for 7 years. So how do we reconcile this? Well, we reconcile this by knowing that there are two halves to the tribulation period. Satan is going to have some man here on the earth who is possessed by him for 3.5 years, and then Satan himself, who is a fallen angel and can disguise himself as a human being, he will come the second half. Okay? So we have what is known as a decoy Messiah, and then we have the counterfeit Messiah. So Satan's basically, he's going to get two shots at this, a decoy and a counterfeit, and then Jesus will return. So the people who go through the tribulation are going to have to know that there's a decoy coming first, and then Satan will step in and try to convince everybody at that point that he is the Messiah, and then Jesus will come back. So, in order to fully understand what Satan's up to, let's look at these two witnesses in the Bible. What are they all about? The book of Revelation talks about two witnesses. In the ancient Jewish wedding, whenever the groom would get his bride and take her back to the place he built at his father's house, two of the groomsmen would assist them, and they would stand outside the door of that wedding chamber. And whenever the marriage was consummated and it was proven that the bride was a virgin, the groom would knock on the door and let these two witnesses know, hey, everything's good, we've consummated, she's a virgin, go tell everybody. So the two witnesses would run back to that wedding party and tell everybody that everything was fine. Okay? So these two witnesses are coming during the tribulation period to let everybody know that, hey, the groom has gotten his bride and everything's good. Okay? Now, these two witnesses are going to be here during the first half. How do I know that? Well, it's because you have the two brides who were taken in the first half. You have the Gentile bride and the Jewish bride, remember? So the two witnesses are needed for the bride. They're not needed for the martyred saints, and they're not needed for the elect. And once the two brides are gone, the witnesses no longer need to be here. Now, following what Satan is doing, the Bible says that Satan is going to cause the abomination of desolation. Satan's going to sit in the temple. First of all, Satan doesn't come until the second half, not the first half. So we know that Satan's going to sit in the temple claiming to be God, and the Bible tells us he's going to kill these two witnesses. They're going to resurrect 3.5 days later, but the whole world is going to celebrate and send gifts to each other. And it talks about making merry and sending gifts. It's basically making a reference to Christmas. We all know that. So at Christmas time, or what they call Hanukkah, when Antiochus Epiphanes put that pig on the altar, Satan's going to do the same thing, but he's going to put himself on the altar, okay? Basically, by sitting on the throne. And he's going to call himself God. Okay, so here's a reference to Christmas. This is the point I'm getting at right here. Satan has been trying to change God's calendar and has succeeded somewhat for the past 2,000 years. He's also tried to hijack God's feast days and has managed to do so somewhat. Okay, so let's think about the three major holidays that Satan's got pretty much a lot of the world celebrating right now. It's Christmas, Easter, and Halloween. Now, do these fit into the timeline anywhere with what Satan's doing? Absolutely. Because Satan is going to take a deadly wound to the head, and he's going to resurrect, and the whole world's going to wander after the beast. And he's going to do it when? Right there. Easter. Not on Passover when Jesus died. He's going to do it on Easter when the whole world is expecting Jesus on Easter Sunday. Okay? Then at Christmas, he's going to pretend to be the second advent of Christ. Now, knowing that Easter and Christmas fit into this fit into this timeline, is Halloween in there also? Yes, let's take a look. Okay, think about this logically. If you were Satan and you were going to hijack one of God's holy feast days, which one would you want? And wouldn't you try to make it all about yourself instead? The answer is yes. Ask yourself why it is that if Satan wants to stay hidden from everybody so badly to make people think he's not real, why would he expose himself on Halloween, that one day of the year? And I'm going to tell you why. It's because, one, he knows humans are double-minded. They don't stop and think about that contradiction. Number two, Satan is going to hijack the one day that's all about Jesus and make it all about himself. And that one day is Halloween. Jesus told us that. Think about the clues Jesus gave us and tell me if this does not represent Halloween. The sun shall be darkened and the moon turned to blood before the great and terrible day of the Lord. Beware of wolves in sheep's clothing. The dead will come out of the graves. Beasts will come out of the bottomless pit. What are skeletons all about? Dead bodies coming out of the graves. Think about it, y'all. Halloween is all about the resurrection. Satan took the one day that's all about Jesus, because Jesus said, I am the resurrection, right? So Satan took the one day that's all about Jesus and the resurrection and made it all about himself. He made it sick. He made it nasty. He made it evil. He made it gory. What calendar day is that on the Gregorian calendar? It's Halloween. We've seen Christmas in the timeline. We've seen Easter in the timeline. Now we've seen Halloween. Can I prove this? Yes, I can. Watch this. Let's take the clues that we have been given and let's work our way backwards. We know that the ascension takes place on their Hanukkah around Christmas time. That's a clue that was given to us. We know that there's 40 days prior to the ascension. Those 40 days take us back to Tabernacles. From Tabernacles, we count back 5 days to Atonement based on Leviticus 23. From there, we count back 10 days to trumpets, which we know is the resurrection. If you do those day counts, it takes you directly to Halloween. Now, when I show you the calendar that God has been giving me for the past several years, it's going to prove this to be true. So you start here at Christmas time, which is their Hanukkah time. You go back your 40 days. You're going to come to Tabernacles on God's calendar. The calendar He gave me that I'm going to show you later. Go back 5 days to your atonement, and then 10 days before that is your trumpets. It will land on Halloween for the resurrection. Now, we're looking at the rapture timeline. So when we divide it into halves, we got to do it this way. The 12, we got to use Daniel's day counts. We don't use the 42 months and 42 months in the other one. Okay? So these day counts, like I told you before, we're pointing to the different calendars. God's calendar, the Jewish calendar, God's calendar, the Jewish calendar. So we have this ascension on the Jewish calendar, and we have the resurrection on God's correct calendar. From here, we can count back to the midpoint of the raptures and then back to the beginning. So if the calendar days from the midpoint of the raptures are counting down to the 1260, 1290, 1335, then when we start here and go back to the beginning, we have to go in reverse order. So we have to go, excuse me, y'all, we have to go 1260, 1290, 1335. Most people want to go 1260, 1290, 1335, and that's not correct. You've got to go backwards like this and count out. Now Daniel said, "Blessed is he who waits and comes to the 1335th day." Why would he say that? Let me show you.